The KRGS Doors Show, proudly brought to you by KRGS Doors. For all your shopfront roller shutters, roller grills, folding closures and bifold doors, visit www.krgsdoors.com.au. Welcome to the KRGS Doors podcast. I'm your host, Drew Blackman. The aim of our podcast is to talk to cool people with cool stories, whether it be our suppliers, customers, staff, other business owners, or people from different walks of life, and get to know them a bit better. If you're interested in coming on, drop us a line or email, or connect with us via Facebook, and we can have a chat to see what we can do. Today, on the 22nd episode of the KRGS Doors podcast, I'm joined by KRGS Doors Managing Director Clayton Blackman and stand-up comedian and TV host Steve Philp. Steve has toured all around the world doing his live shows and worked on television such as The Footy Show and Ready Steady Cook. He was also the understudy for Captain Feathersword from The Wiggles and even starred in a YouTube skit that has had now over 3.8 million views. Please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Steve Philp.
If this doesn't turn you on, folks, you haven't got a switch.
Steve, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. What is the Steve Philp story?
Once upon a time, I was a stand-up comedian until someone ate a bat recently, and it all ended. So I grew up in Newcastle. I'm a proud Novocastrian, and for as long as I could remember, I wanted to be in the Star Wars movies. I was a big Star Wars fan as a kid. I'm not anymore because I'm an adult, and I always wanted to be an actor. So I went to Performing Arts High School, moved to Sydney to try and get into the Star Wars films. That never happened. But what I did do was work right next door at. Do you guys remember Fox Studios?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there was a theme park in there.
Yes.
They kind of built that theme park as a tax write-off, I think, to get the movies built. But and I don't know if you ever went there, but there was a Titanic attraction. Do you remember that?
Right. Didn't last long?
They built thousands of people died on the Titanic, right? pretty macabre attraction, isn't it? Like, I've been to Port Arthur and I don't remember seeing their laser tag attraction.
No, that's true, mate. That's true. So, what did you do at Fox Studios, mate?
Yeah, so I dabbled in a little bit of stuff. I started work. They had a Simpsons, the Simpsons theme attraction there, and I dressed up as Homer Simpson for a couple of years, and that was a lot of fun. And I did a lot of kids shows originally. I was actually the backup for Captain Feathersword in The Wiggles.
Yeah,
but he never ever had a sick day. I reckon he was. I reckon he was worried that I'd be better than him. So he was never sick.
You never got to start off the bench, mate, for Captain Feathersword.
Brutal. Right?
How long did that gig go for?
I sort of loitered around for a little bit and then realised that he wasn't even he was never letting me have a crack. So after a while, I was a bit like Brandon Smith at the Melbourne Storm. I might bugger off.
Yeah, just never retire.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was doing kid shows, I met a bunch of guys who are promoters, who are managers of comedians such as Carl Barron, the Umbilical Brothers, and they also promote kid shows. And they were saying to me, "You're pretty funny. Why don't you do stand up?" And I'd actually never thought about it before. And they convinced me to go in a couple of stand up competitions. They run one in Canberra called Green Faces, and on my second ever gig, I made the final, and from then I was addicted. So I've been doing stand up for about 17 years professionally since. I haven't done any other. I've done other stuff related to stand up. I've done some radio, and I do a lot of TV show warm up, which involves stand up as well. So if you've ever been to see a TV show filmed, firstly, I had no idea why you would ever go and see a TV show film, but you could be there for a long time. But I've worked on a ton of shows I worked on Ready Steady Cook, the cooking show. Do you guys remember that?
Yes, on Channel 10.
Yeah, Tomatoes, Capsicums, very strange show. I worked on that for 8 years, and then I worked at the NRL Footy Show for over 15 years, which was a lot of fun as well. So, and obviously COVID stopped all of that, unfortunately, but fingers crossed.
There would have been some good times there, Steve, on a Thursday night with Fatty and the boys on the Footy Show.
Yeah, some of the best, like I know that the Footy Show, towards the end copped a lot of grief. But if you think about it for a while, like whether you like footy or not, name another show that ran for 25 years. Like
There's only, I think, Hey Hey at Saturday and the Footy Show, mate. They've been the two longest shows.
Yeah, to cross, that amount of, back in the day when it was classic Footy Show stuff and the stuff they used to get up to. And the other thing I say to people is, name another TV show where the grand final show every year, you had to buy tickets, and every year, it would sell out in a venue like the Entertainment Centre.
Yeah.
There'd be 8,000 people there paying to see that. Now, if you were, a TV show these days like The Voice or The Masked Singer or any of these shows that are popular, you're not selling out 7,000 seats, right? I know a lot of those people are there to see the footy players and whatnot as well. But, yeah, you can bag it out all you like. But for what it was, it was, a lot of good times.
It was a religion, mate. Every Thursday night was the Footy Show.
100%. And, I grew up a massive footy fan. As I said, I grew up in Newcastle. So to work with, blokes like Fatty and, even your Joey Johnses or Big Man, those kind of guys.
Was Matty Johns there when you were there, mate? Yes, obviously.
Yeah, Matt, when I first started, Matty was there, and that was unreal. I did 3 or 4 episodes when one of the producers came to me. We used to do a lot of live shows in other states. Like we did Crown Casino in Melbourne a couple of times.
Yeah.
And we did every year they'd do Suncorp Piazza.
Yes, that's right.
In Brisbane, and those shows were the best. They'd have 7,000 people in the crowd. I'd spend half an hour with them at the start, warming them up, having dance comps and lookalikes and whatever. And we were doing our production meeting at so I'd only been there for about 3 episodes, and one of the producers comes up to me after I got off my flight and arrived at the gig at Suncorp and says, "Hey, has anyone spoken to you about what you're doing on the show tonight?" And I was like, no. I mean, obviously I'm doing warm up. They said, "No, you might be doing stand up on the show tonight." Right? And I was like, "Look on the telly?" And they go, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, well, when we have an idea of that, confirming that, because firstly, I obviously do a lot of stand up in my warm up. I don't want to use that material before the show.
You don't want to double dip and use all the same routine, mate."
Totally. And the other thing was I hadn't done a lot of telly spots at that point, and to get told that you're going to do it in front of 7,000 people in an outdoor kind of environment, things can go wrong. Just ask Craig McLaughlin.
I was just going to say the same thing, mate. Remember Craig McLaughlin's bloody...
Hey, Mona.
Yeah. Didn't that sink?
They came to me and said, "Look, unfortunately, it's all depending on time on the show. So if everything goes to plan, then you'll be, somewhere in the back end of the show. If it doesn't, then..." So my warm-up all of a sudden become heightened because I was like, "Holy crap, there's a decent chance I'm going to be doing 3 or 4 minutes of material." And, I was like, this could be crazy. So
were you sweating bullets then or what, mate?
Yeah, and then I've still got to do my warm-up, right? And remember, there's 7,000 people there, so you already have nervous energy in front of a crowd like that. And I always found the footy show fans and Queensland fans in particular. I've done stand-up in Brisbane for many years, and, they're some of the best crowds you'll get. They're a little bit looser. They start drinking at about, 10 a.m. as opposed to 1 a.m. here in New South Wales.
1 p.m.
Yeah, they're a different breed, and I love them for that, and I mean that in the nicest possible way.
That's
although
good.
Origin's coming. But yeah, so what was it, like 2 segments to go, and the producer says, "Listen, mate, we've run out of time, unfortunately," which was somewhat of a relief. I mean, at this point of your career, a TV spot is great, especially on a TV show where stand-up's got a great opportunity to kick on as the footy show. But I reckon, now looking back, what they did was they got me in the studio the following week back at Channel 9 in Sydney and said, "Look, on the
Warm 'em
Tuesday,
up.
hey, you're definitely on the show this weekend."
Yeah, good.
It gave me an opportunity to properly work out my set, and it ended up being great because obviously I did warm up again.
Yeah.
And then I said to the audience, "Hey, listen, I'm doing stand up on the show tonight, and I've never done stand up on a major network TV show before, so help me out." And because the crowd liked me from the warm up, when Fatty introduced me on the show, the crowd was like a standing ovation. I remember thinking, the people at home must have been going, "Who is this?"
This bloke must be great.
Yeah, totally. If you watch it back, I'm there going, "Okay, shush, got to tell jokes, shush." Like this.
This guy slipped the crowd 50s all the way around.
That's what it was like, yeah. And then they were so on board, because if you're what a lot of people don't know about the warm-up is if, like, especially with stand-ups, I can make or break someone's spot. Sometimes people would be sort of semi-struggling on a show like that. But if I'm there in the background with a big
cheering them on,
clap, then the crowd will follow that clap. And there was a couple of comedians, the national ones who I won't name, who were douchebags to me prior to the show. And I just put my hands like that, mate, not clapping.
I'm not helping you out.
Yeah.
Do your
and
best.
a couple of bigger name ones come over and say, hey, thanks for that clap, mate. You got them going in that bit there or whatever. So, yeah, good
Well, that's
times.
good.
Actually, I worked on the episode where the famous broken arm.
Oh, yeah, with Benny Ross.
Yeah, so Ben Ross, Wendell Saylor. I remember chatting backstage to Wendell. You know what Wendell's like. He's always talking himself up.
Pumps his own tyres up, Del.
He's out the back and he's really like trying to, intimidate Ben Ross. And I remember saying, don't break his arm.
Oh,
It was like those effects. And then later when it happened, I was like, oh, this is my fault. But it was an interesting show because, once again, the footy show's live. And so this happened at about 4 segments in, and there's usually about 9 or 10 segments in that show. And when it happened, obviously everyone panicked. Bo Ryan dropped the F-bomb and they went straight to a commercial. Yeah, there's like the commercial break goes for about 4 minutes. Now, like everyone at the front was freaking out because they were so close to it and they'd seen his arm completely broke and it looked in a bad way. And I can't 100% remember what happened, but as soon as there's a commercial break, I'm on the microphone, right? That's my job. So I think I remember telling people to sit down and then move back, and then there was a couple of minutes while their hands were tied together because it was a grand final. So the medic had to untie the hands, and then I didn't know what to do. So I remember, if you're at the footy and someone gets hurt and they get carried off on a stretcher, well, for some reason, what do we do as a crowd?
Start clapping.
We clap. Yeah, I've never understood that. It's like, well, at least he's not dead. I don't know. Well done, mate. You got injured and we're clapping you off. I've never understood that. It's just a sympathy clap or whatever. So weirdly, I've done that. He's getting carried out of the studio. I didn't know what else to do because sometimes silence is not great. And I go, ladies and gentlemen, give him a round of applause. The audience are like, are we really clapping this shit? And then he waved with his other arm. So that was somewhat of a relief. And then I do remember thinking that we shouldn't be coming back. The footy show was all about big live audience play-ons. And a play-on is when you come back from the commercial. In my head, I was thinking, there's no way. We just saw a man break his arm on TV. We should be coming up to silence and maybe someone going, okay, look, obviously something pretty serious happened. Just let you know he's okay. And then maybe we do some applause, right? But I hear the director say, no, big live play on, right? So we come back out of the commercial break with a man breaking his arm, like, woo! And I'm thinking, what are we doing?
How good's this show?
Yeah. And what they tried to do then was just move on like nothing.
Yeah, like nothing had happened.
And unfortunately for me, and I'm not saying this is the worst thing that happened is to me, because obviously the worst thing that happened was to Ben Ross, but I had to do jokes for another 4 commercial breaks, right? So that's about another 45 minutes if you add it up in total. And the audience had enough. They'd just seen a man break his arm, right? And so I'm out there trying to do gear, and they're all looking like, mate, we just want to go. We've seen something pretty serious. And as it turned out, right, he broke his humerus, and so did I.
Boom dish. Growing up, were you funny as a kid, or was it to come naturally comedian?
Yeah, not really, mate. I don't know. I tend to think most comedians I know were never really the centre of attention. And if they were, then they still are, and that's like the most annoying comedian you can ever meet. Like, we go on tour with a lot of comedians, and if there's 6 of you in a van or on a cruise ship or wherever you are, doing a gig, then the most annoying comedian is the guy who's like trying to be funny constantly. I'm not. In fact, people get quite disappointed at me at a barbecue, right? Because it's one of the only professions that you get introduced at a barbecue. So for a barbecue, no one will say, oh, that's Gary. He's a butcher, right? No, Gary will just get introduced as Gary. That's him, right? But for some reason, it's always, hey, this is Steve. He's a comedian.
Tell us a funny jokes too.
Totally. And then you see people there's a couple of ways to go. People then try and be funnier than you, right? Which in a social sense, I'm not that guy looking for a laugh. If there's an opportunity for a joke and I think of it, I'll dive in on it. But that's not. I prefer just to relax, talk some shit, footy, whatever. But yeah, then all of a sudden you just see people looking at you all the time, and after a while they're having their own little chat, and they're probably like, "He's not very funny."
When's he going to start his gear?
Yeah, that's right. They expect you to be on the total time.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd get a lot too. Hey, I heard this great joke the other day. Can I tell you? And like, I'm sure people don't go up to chefs and go, "I've got this great recipe for Lemingtons. Let's share it." But yeah, I'm sure you get, "I've got this joke. I've got to tell you this joke.
I've got some material for you, Steve. Maybe you could throw it into your show."
Yeah, maybe. That's right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of now you've just turned into that annoying person.
Mate, tell us about your first gig.
My first gig was at the Bridge Hotel in Balmain.
Great spot.
Yeah, great spot. Great live bands. I remember going to see some bands there as a young lad. Some of the finest bands cut their teeth at the Bridge Hotel, and they used to have open mic night on a Tuesday, I think it was, and it wasn't ideal. It was usually most of the people in the room were the other comedians, the open micers. They'd always put on a paid MC who was a comedian as well, who would kind of pick up the slack from everyone being quite average. And you relied on the laughs of the other comedians, and that's never a good idea because comedians generally laugh at different things. I go to open mic nights, and if someone's battling hard, that's when I laugh the most. It's not great support. Not the most ideal support for
rock solid. These comedians, they are. They all stick together.
Yeah, we all hate each other. And so those gigs were tough. Like, good story though about that first gig because I kind of went okay, like as good as you can go. I remember it not being a death or anything, but a really good mate of mine turned up. Now, this guy at the time, I think he worked in sales, Adam Knight. He's one of the funniest guys I know off stage, but he's never had any intentions of being a comedian. He's never once said, "I really want to be a comedian." And he comes up to me at the gig beforehand. He obviously sees how anxious I am about doing my first ever stand-up comedy gig. He goes, "Listen, man," he goes, "if you want, I'll put my name down." It was one of those gigs where you turn up and you put your name down and you can get up. And he said, "I'll put my name down and I'll go on just before you go." He goes, "I don't have any jokes. I've got nothing to talk about. It'll suck so bad that when you come on,
you'll kill it."
Amazing. Right? Yeah, and I thought, like, firstly, I was like, well, you're going to be a mate for the rest of our lives. Like, most people that, say stand-up comedy or speaking in front of public is their ultimate fear.
Talk about taking one for the team.
Yeah, and so what ended up happening was he did put his name down, but the MC got it around the wrong way and he introduced me first, which was fine. I obviously had to go on stage and it went fine. But then the funniest bit was, at the end, he forgot that he didn't introduce Adam Knight, right? And Adam by the stage just had 10 or 12 beers and probably shouldn't have even went on stage. But he goes, "Oh, sorry, there's one more, Adam Knight." And Adam's like, "Oh, hang on, no, I don't really want to do this," but still went up and tried to perform something that he didn't have. And I remember, like, clearly, everyone in the room's going, "What is this?" But I'm at the back like, yes, loving it.
Don't tell me Adam got on and won the night, though.
Yeah, there wasn't a competition there, but I've never ever. Whenever we're out somewhere and Adam is there and there's somebody who doesn't know him, I always introduce him with that story just to let him know what kind of a bloke he is.
Top bloke.
That's a cool bloke.
Yeah.
So my first gig wasn't that bad. It was about, I reckon I did about 3 gigs and they were all pretty good. And then I went in this competition in Canberra and its audience voted. So I think 10 of us from Sydney went down in the van. Sorry, there was a couple from Melbourne as well. And there was always someone from Canberra in the heat. And that was the worry, was that they always brought mates. And so, their mates were obviously going to vote for them.
Yeah.
Backstage, I was that nervous because I'd only done gigs in front of about 7 or 8 people. And at this stage, I really didn't have many jokes, to be honest. Like, coming from an acting background, I kind of ad-libbed a lot. And that's now my strength, is that I certainly am able to do that quite easy now. But I'm backstage, I'm about to go on, and I'm that nervous that I look around and we're in this little storeroom kind of thing that's just at the pub. And there's one of those vacuum cleaners. It's like the Ghostbusters one with a big backpack on it. And I jokingly say to, there's another comedian backstage, I say to him, I should wear that out there and not mention it. And he goes, oh, mate. He goes, that's genius. He goes, do it, right? And this bloke to this day claims that it was his idea, right? But I still remember that it was my idea. He just kind of egged me on. But so I don't know why, but it kind of made me feel safer. I just went out there, did whatever I was going to do anyway with this vacuum cleaner on. And it was flopping around the nozzle of the vacuum cleaner was flopping around behind me everywhere. And whatever I said, they just lapped it up. And like to this day, I don't think I've had, nearly such a great gig. And I won quite easy that heat. And I went into the final. And I remember coming back for the final. I was the next week. And when I turned up, all the bar staff who were there every week were saying, hey, we've seen all the winners. And you're the funniest by far. You're going to win this, right? And like Charlie Pickering and there was comedians of note in this final. And I'd only done 4 gigs, right? And to hear that stuff,
that was good, mate.
It wasn't well. It was good. It was nice to hear, but I think it completely threw me because then I didn't know what to do going back out. I was like, do I wear the vacuum cleaner again, right? Because I was that guy, or what do I do? I ad-libbed a lot, so I wasn't sure what to do. I ended up taking a mop and bucket out, and I died, like the biggest death that to this day, I reckon. Like I did 7 minutes of just crickets, no one laughing, and I quit comedy that night. I was like, right.
So from now on, you just always wear the vacuum cleaner, mate, or what?
Yeah, I know. What a rookie error. But I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. Like, I'd done 4 gigs, so I had no idea about whether obviously the same people weren't going to be there. It was just the bar staff that knew me. So I literally could have done the same thing with the vacuum cleaner.
Got a sponsorship with Hoover now.
100%. So I quit comedy, went back to doing, I wasn't really doing comedy. It was just open mic and stuff. But I went back to doing the acting in the kids shows. And then after a while found myself just starting to write again, like writing some gags. And my friend, again, who is a manager of like Arj Barker and a few of these other guys, Ross Noble, he was saying, look, it's a bug. He goes, you were good at it. You're only just starting. You'd be silly if you didn't have
Don't throw it away.
Got back in there and thankfully I listened to them all right. So,
As a stand-up comedian, what's the biggest challenges you face?
There's a few gigs that have just started back, which is great.
Yeah.
So on a logistics front, this happened to me last week. There was no spotlight at a gig. As a comedian, you need 2 things: a microphone and a light, right? And, unless it's a day gig, obviously, then you're fine. But I turn up and there's no light. So I got off, and one of the other comedians has taken a photo of me, and I'm in the complete darkness. I mean, I don't know how you're supposed to tell jokes.
Did you get everyone to hold their torches on their phones or something, mate, eh?
Absolutely. I did mention that, in the gig. But, look, that was actually a pretty good gig considering no one could see anybody's face, which is usually a help. I remember I did a gig at the Australian Hotel in Cessnock, which is just near the jail, which is quite funny because the jail's right next to the high school there. So
wow.
Instead of going to university in Cessnock, you go straight to jail, right? Yeah. And I get there and the bloke goes, oh, do you need a microphone, do you, mate? Right?
Good start.
It's generally pretty useful, mate.
Either that or a megaphone will be good.
Yeah, totally. Like a lot of comedians talk about the comedian Dave Grant, who's no longer with us, but he was a real mentor he was a Victorian comedian, one of the best comedians you'll ever see, one of those rapid fire, kind of broke the rules as to what most Melbourne comedians are like. A lot of Melbourne comedians are slower kind of rhythm and sit on things a bit slower, and the audiences are different down there, and Dave wasn't like that. He was trigger happy, bang, bang, bang. It was like always so funny. And whenever you turn up to a gig, sometimes the stage would be 30 metres away or the lights would be in the wrong spot. And Dave Grant's a headliner, and a lot of headliners are have too much ego to try and get there and fix up chairs and stuff. But he would Dave Grant the room. Everyone calls it that now. So he would get there and he'd go, right, you grab the chairs. Let's move all the chairs forward. He'd say to the venue, this is all wrong here. We need to set this up perfectly. He'd move the lights. He'd say, keep them outside. Don't bring them in just yet. We're not ready. He'd move the stage forward. We'd do all of this stuff. And then, the show would be, well, I mean, you would never know, but he would say, look, the show's not going to work this way. And every time he did it, the show would be fantastic. You look back on that now, and if you turn up to a gig, you can work it out easily sometimes that this is going to be good. I've done gigs where, there's a giant dance floor. Where was it? I did a gig was that Wyong Leagues, and it was their presentation night. And two funny things happened that night. They had a couple of big projectors up on the screen, and they had it like a revolving slideshow of the sponsors. And I was meant to do half an hour of stand-up. So at one point, the MC said something like, and later on, your comedian is footy show comedian Steve Philp, and they put this picture up, and they'd gotten the picture from the internet. So they used this picture of me from like 10 years ago, right? And I looked a lot younger. And I remember as I looked up, this guy at the table next to me, who I didn't know, just leans across and says, "Hey, mate," and points to the photo and goes, "That was a while ago, wasn't it?" Like this. Welcome to Wyong.
Yeah, just what I needed. Got them on board early.
Yeah, and then I'm on stage, and again, they had this giant dance floor, right? Because later on, back in those days, you could dance, not like now, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm on stage, and I'm battling because they're so far away. Comedy works better when you're right in front of someone, and so it's a big room. I'm doing all right, but I look down. I'm thinking I'm losing their attention slightly. I look down. The people from the Wildlife Australian Reptile Park are in the crowd, and they've got lizards and little snakes and stuff. And while I'm trying to tell jokes, they're like, "Would you like to pat a snake to people?" I'm like, "Hello,
I'm up here."
Little bit busy here.
Yeah. Wow.
That definitely would be a challenge trying to compete. I always find I do a little bit of MC work, and I find when they bring the food out and you hear the knives and forks clink clacking, and you're trying to talk over the top of that, it's
gives you the shits.
People are more interested in their filet mignon than what you're trying to present.
Yeah, and alternatively, a lot of those functions, footy, sports, lunches and stuff, they'll put you on while they're eating. And I don't know if you've ever tried to laugh with food in your mouth. But,
It's not good.
And you'll say to them, no, you'll go, "Oh, listen, this is not a good spot for you to go on." And they'll look at you like they've planned this whole thing out, and I'm sorry, but this is the only spot for you to go in. Or alternatively, it'll be the amount of times I've done gigs where it's a charity gig for someone who has cancer, or someone who's sick or dying, and then a couple of these happened to me. I did a gig at the Randwick race course. There must have been 2,500 people there, and I was just doing 5 minutes, and I was on first, and I turn up, and the guy goes, "Oh, just by the way," so the girl was 23 and she had terminal cancer. I think she had 4 months left to live or something. Desperately sad. And they say Roy Billing from, the classic Australian actor, Underbelly and The Castle and The Dish and all those films, he's emceeing it. And I say to Roy, because he goes, "Oh, mate, you're on after the girl makes her speech." And I was like, "Oh, are you serious?" So she comes in on the back of a Harley Davidson, it's a standing ovation, and then gets up and makes this unbelievably sad speech about how she's about to die. And then they're like, "Now it's time for some comedy," right?
Everyone's in tears, and then you're going to make them all laugh, mate.
Oh, man, yeah, and that's happened a few times. I did a white ribbon fundraiser, and I came on after the montage for all the women who had died that year from domestic violence. And they go, "All right, now to cheer things up, here's some comedy." I'm like, no!
So I'm gathering you don't prefer to come on early to a gig, mate. You like to stay out late as long as possible.
I don't mind. Honestly, I don't mind going on first or whatever, last.
As long as they're not eating.
Yeah, not eating, and I don't want to come on after someone who's about to die.
True. We must remember this, Drewy, for the future.
Yes.
Yes. Neither of you guys are about to die.
No, mate. No. Touch wood, I'm all good at the moment.
You've had the COVID test, have you?
No, mate, no. Just went for a second opinion, that was all.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the podcast. We have a word from our sponsor. KRGS Doors Fold Enclosure allows you to have a security concertina door in any shape or any length. Having no floor track eliminates any trip hazard. Custom made in 150mm or 300mm wide panel, these concertina doors allow your shopfront to become an illusion. The KRGS Fold Enclosure can be filled with your choice of clear infill, vision mesh, or a combination, along with powder coating to meet your requirements. For more information, visit www.krgsstores.com.au or call 1800 897 822. Now back to the podcast.
What are some of the changes you've seen in the industry in your 17 years?
Look, I think this year there was a massive change, obviously, because no crowds, there was no comedy, and a lot of Zoom comedy started, which was intriguing. I did a lot of those gigs early on in New South Wales, where companies would pay you to do a Zoom meeting to their office. They were obviously all working from home. I've never had so much anxiety before a gig before. I honestly, and I sat in the corner. I had to have about 6 beers, which was fine. The good thing about it was if you do a corporate gig, people always say to you, comedy must be hard. When comedy's in a comedy club, comedy's not hard. Comedy's fine. When comedy's
in a corporate gig.
Yeah, and when, again, like I just mentioned, you don't have the relevant lighting and the sound.
Yeah.
The tables are in the wrong direction. No one knows you're on, or and you guys would know this, or someone decides at the company, this happens a lot, they'll go, hey, we decided not to tell anyone that there's a comedian. We thought we'd just say that you're like a public speaker. And I'm like, it's never a good idea. No. It's always best if everyone knows comedy's on. It's not. I'm not a magician. I'm not a stripper. Like, that's not how it works. And so, in that regard, sometimes leaving a corporate gig when you're used to back in the day would be tricky because you'd have to be negotiating your way out and you've just sucked and everyone gets to see your face and you're leaving the room. Right? Whereas Zoom comedy gigs were great because you just had to hit the button and you were gone and you were home in your lounge room already. It didn't matter anymore.
Then you
didn't have to wear pants.
And then you can get back on the piss as well, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did most of mine. I've got a backyard toilet. I did most of my gigs up on the toilet and showed everyone. I was like, if this gig goes to the shitter, then at least I'm on the shitter already.
It's close and handy.
In terms of another thing, though, I think what a lot of people mentioned to me, and someone mentioned to me at a gig this week, and it's always an older person, they'll say, what's it like doing comedy these days? You can't make jokes about anything. For some reason, people have this perception that there's a lot of that, 2PC rubbish that goes around where people say, you can't make jokes. Mate, you can't make jokes about anything anymore. And I think if you're one of those people that say that, then you're either just covering for either being racist, sexist, or one of those things. Because on cruise ship gigs, we do on a comedy cruise, I think it's day 2, they do a Q&A with all the comedians on stage. All 7 comedians sit on stage and the audience get to ask questions, and that question comes up every single cruise. Yeah. What's it like doing comedy now that comedy's gone PC and you can't make jokes about anything? If you're relying on those jokes that they're talking about, which is like, people making fun of Asian people or people making fun of Muslims or Aboriginal folk or whatever, then you shouldn't be doing comedy because, to me, you can make a joke about this rice paper crisp or like deodorant or whatever and make it as funny as you could possibly be, and people could walk out just losing their mind over it. It doesn't have to be the most edgy thing in the entire world. Or if it is, it doesn't have to, segregate one person or one, culture or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I find. Like Carl Barron's very good on just that observation comedy, that just the simplest things that you sort of think, shit, that happened to me yesterday, and makes you laugh.
100%, yeah. And that's what, I found with the Zoom comedy was quite good because we were in a very unique situation where for the first time that any of us alive could remember, we were literally all of us stuck in exactly the same situation.
Yeah.
We were all stuck at home, homeschooling. I was doing some gags saying, because obviously there was a lot of drinking going on during lockdown. Our homeschooling, because I've got an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old, our staff room was just littered with alcohol. So there's a lot of drinking going on. But on the plus side, I did get to sleep with a teacher. So I've always had a fantasy of sleeping with a teacher, and I got to sleep with a teacher. Although at least one day, hope for a relief teacher to turn up.
Did that make parent-teacher night awkward?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, really, I like that. Do you know what? I reckon parent-teacher night was great this year because, we were in lockdown semi still, I think, and you could just do it like this on Zoom.
Yes.
Right, perfect. But, I think that's probably another change in comedy is that for some reason the older generation people think that, you can't, I think Facebook's kind of done that a bit.
You got to take the piss out of all the nationalities.
Yeah, I think that's what. I don't know. I'm fine with Indian comedians doing jokes about Indian people, but I don't know that you can be. Yeah, look, I don't know. It's a fine line, I think, but if you're complaining about the fact that you can't do this material, then you probably need to start writing some more material.
Yeah.
I think there's so many things that are funny.
And also probably have a look at yourself in that sense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like when people come up to you after the show and these kind of things, and they'll go, "Oh, I've got a joke for you," and straight away you're like, "Oh no, here we go." And inevitably, it'll end up being racist of some description, and you're like, "Oh, no thanks."
Can't use that one,
mate. Speaking of gigs, how do you put up with hecklers?
I make it pretty clear on in my show, and like I don't know. I've never really had any major heckling. I think it's because I come out from the get-go and I talk to the audience fairly, not aggressively, but I'm like, "Hey, what do you do? What's your go?" I make it pretty clear that if you're watching, that you'll have no doubt that if you were to take me on, it's not going to end well for you.
No one's going to put their hand up and have a shot at the title because they're going to cop a barrage.
And I don't know that there is heckling that much anymore. Like I mean, it depends where you are. I've certainly been told one of the worst gigs I did was at a place called the Colleton Hotel. You guys know where Colleton is?
I know the Colleton Hotel, yeah.
People are being shot there, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and some genius decided to put comedy on in the main bar area on a Thursday, just like pop-up comedy, and I was on first, and somehow I made it work. It was a bikie pub, but I was doing a lot of jokes about Mount Druitt, right? Now, if you live in one of those suburbs, then I think the best thing you can have about living in a shithole is having a sense of humour about the fact that you live in one of those. Yeah, if you've got that, you'll be having a good time. But so most of those people did have that. There was a gentleman there with Southern Cross tattoo, rat's tail, that kind of guy who made it pretty clear to me in the break that if I didn't apologise to the people of Mount Druitt, that he would stab me in the car park. Now, this guy, right, he looked like a lot of things, right, but he didn't look like a liar. So, I thought it was probably best that I say sorry to him, but you know what? Sometimes my mouth and my brain don't communicate, and here's a great example of that. So I got back up and I said, "Listen, I'm going to make an apology to the people of Mount Druitt, and it's because there's a bloke at the back of the room who's not happy. So what I'll do is I'll pick on somewhere else. I'll pick on Tasmania, easy target. I went there last month. In fact, I went to Beaconsfield. You guys remember what happened in Beaconsfield? There was like 2 guys trapped in a hole, 14 days. That's a long time being trapped in a hole, right? Then they got out. They got like $2.4 million. That's a lot of money for being trapped in a hole, isn't it? And then I go, what do you reckon the people of Mount Druitt got? They've been trapped in a hole their lives. And I don't think that was the apology he was looking for. So, but I'm still alive, fellas.
So he didn't stab you?
No, one day.
Security guards had to escort you out there.
That sometimes used to egg, and this is that bit where I can't shut up sometimes. And I did a gig in Newcastle with Alan Robinson, who used to be on the footy show.
Little Robbo.
The pest?
Yeah, absolute pest. A good family friend of mine, a great bloke. And Matty Johns was on as well, this sportsman's lunch, and I was doing the comedy. And I sat next to Matty, and there would have been 30 of the gladiators from Newcastle in the room. And I'm talking like the boss, all these blokes, right? And I lean into Matty, and Matty's like one of the biggest jokers of all time. And I say to him, "Would you do any jokes about those blokes over there?" Right? And he just looks at me and goes, "Absolutely effing not." Right? And I took that on board as like a challenge. Right? So I got up on stage and I got them to like me first. So I did about 5 or 10 minutes of all my good gear, and they were on board. And then I was like, "Right, fellas, we need to chat. Look at your crap mullet." I just went them. I just and thankfully for me, the room were like, "Wow, this is gold." Like Matty Johns had the most shock look on his face that I've ever seen, and and I remember later on, like they were fine. In fact, they said to me afterwards that I should go to their clubhouse and do some jokes. Later
wow!
On. I wasn't sure that was a great idea.
Yeah, you mightn't have got out, mate.
I do remember later on in the auction, there was a fishing trip for sale, and Alan Robinson's like, who wants the fishing trip? And the bikies were like, we do. And Robbo's like, there's 13 people. Are you going to take the comedian and throw him overboard?
They tied the stove. That's where they tied the stove to you and drop you over the side, mate.
100%. So, like, in those scenarios, I actually find it like a chat. When someone says to you, no, I wouldn't do that. I'm like, it's a great way to break the ice. And if you do it, like, I wasn't being nasty. It was all just, bikie drug material. Anyway, I think I called them an average Sons of Anarchy or something like that.
Average Sons of Anarchy.
A few home truths in there somewhere too. They say comedy's truthful, isn't it? Mate, what's it like being backstage with a group of comedians for a show?
Here's the thing. I don't have a lot of friends who are comedians. They're very strange cats, hey. Like, I've got some very good mates who are comedians, but I don't like comedy. Kind of bores me a bit. I don't watch comedy. Unless a good friend will say, you got to check this bit out from Bill Burr. It's amazing. It's incredible. It's life-changing or something like that. Then I won't watch it. For most of my life, I've gone to work and had to watch comedy while I'm at work anyway. Yeah. So I don't then go and, I'm sure you guys don't sit around and looking at garage doors the entire time when you get home, right? Like,
correct. And you don't try and pinch their material either, mate.
And that's the thing too. I think sometimes you get a vision of, is that yours? Is that mine? I'm not sure. I don't know. Did I come up with that idea? Or And so it's tricky. I think if you sit around, and I know a lot of comedians do, they sit there and watch comedy specials nonstop. And that's fine. I'm not saying that's a good idea or a bad idea, but it's just not for me. I don't know. So sometimes in that scenario, sitting in backstage in a comedy venue is not the world's greatest thing. I do remember sitting probably about a year ago, and a comedian walked in. I went, name him, and he said, we all started chatting, and he said, hey, has anyone here tried to kill themselves in the last week? I was like, wow. Well, in about a minute, I'm about to walk out on stage and try and make people laugh.
Wow.
And I don't know if that's the conversation we should be having right now. I'm happy to talk to you about that at the end of the show if you like.
That's not the lead-in question, is it?
No. So
you spoke about Matty Johns before, mate. Do you get a chance to listen to his family podcast?
I've been a little bit busy lately, but I've seen it. I do follow his Instagram and whatnot, and I love Matty. I was meant to work on the Matty Johns show all this year. Yeah, I've worked on them previously. I've worked a couple of shows here and there with Matty, and obviously worked with him at the Footy Show, and a great bloke. And I love everything he does. He's amazing. So I really want to check that out.
Check it. Do yourself a favour. He's very, very. The family one comes out of a Friday morning.
Yeah,
and I know we're promoting someone else's podcast here, but mate, it's very, very good. If I can get half his followers, I'll be absolutely wrapped. But it's a really good. Get a chance to listen to it. It's good with the family and so forth. With Trish and his boys, they do a good job.
Yeah, it's great. I love the banter that his boys have obviously growing up in that house. They've had
the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree there with them too.
Absolutely,
mate. Away from work, how do you relax?
I've got a young family, so I obviously love spending time with them. And I remember thinking that I was never going to do any material about kids, because I think people go out to get away from that kind of stuff and don't necessarily want to hear about it. But you guys have got kids.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it dominates your life, doesn't it? It's after a while, about a year of saying no, I'm not going to do any material. All I was thinking of doing was writing jokes about the stuff that had happened and things that had happened and things that were said. And so it was silly not to. I absolutely love spending time with my family. I love exercising a fair bit. I still play touch footy. I probably shouldn't be, but still kick around playing touch footy, a bit of indoor cricket.
That's good.
I like exercise a fair bit and drink a fair few beers. Got a keg out in the backyard. So...
Steve, have you got a favourite comedian that you looked upon, or not tried to model yourself off, because obviously you got your own model, but is there anyone that you looked upon that was a favourite comedian?
I like watching comedy that is really different, because I think I've done a couple of festival shows and I've made them really quite different, where I've had different videos and I've had, guest performers, dancers. I did a thing where I was talking about how on a cruise ship, a magician or a singer would have backing dancers, and how come, comedians couldn't have that. So I brought a couple of backing dancers out to dance on the punchlines and stuff like that. So I do, when you're doing a gig in a pub, you can't necessarily do heaps of different stuff. But so I like people like that. I like a Dimitri Martin, who's an American comedian who does sort of, I don't know if you've seen him, but there's a couple of routines he does where he plays guitar. He's not singing, but he's just doing one-liners.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of doodling with a notepad. That's really quite unusual as well. I like that. I like someone like a Sam Simmons in that regard in Australia. Sam obviously made a name for himself by making loafers, shoes out of actual loaves of bread. Like any of that absurdist kind of stuff. I like. I really dig that kind of stuff. So on the local front, there's a lot of amazing local comedians who've always been incredible. Like I mentioned, Dave Grant at the start. There's a Brisbane comedian called Fred Lang, who I don't know if you guys have ever seen, but he never made it as far as fame goes on TV or whatnot. But he's easily one of the best comedians that this country's ever produced. He would do sports lunches, and no matter if he didn't have a light or a proper mic, he would still just destroy. So I admire those people who can work in any scenario. I think these days there's a lot of niche comedians who I think once they travel struggle a little bit to work with different crowds, where I think I'm quite proud of the fact that I can fit into most scenarios.
To wrap up our podcast, we ask our Fast 5 questions, which is a rapid fire, just to get to know you a little bit better. What would be your last meal?
I had half a little rice cracker just before, like a salt and vinegar rice cracker. I wanted to go for another run, so I was trying to work out what to eat for in between. So,
thanks. And your drink of choice, you may have already answered this one.
I'm one of those massive craft beer wankers. So, I've got, what happened in the lockdown? I know this is meant to be a fast 5, but I've had a home keg system forever. In the lockdown, I convinced my neighbours to get one. And so there's 3 of us with 3 taps, and we rang every pub in Sydney and asked them what they were doing with their beer that wasn't being used. And we amassed 17. Yeah, we amassed 17 kegs at one point.
You blokes are a genius.
That's
it's one of my greatest achievements.
That's clever. That is clever.
So I drink anything that's fruity. Like I don't know. I remember when you couldn't buy a beer that had flavour in it. Now there's plenty of those beers.
So you do like a pale ale, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I like IPAs, and the one I've got in my keg at the moment is 7.2%. So
that'll blow your head off.
Craft beer. Yeah, craft beer people get criticised all the time, but I'm like, you go back to your little 3.5s and go into the toilet 900 times. The rest of you great northern drinkers, and I'll have 3 and have a good night.
It's funny you mentioned about the craft beer. I remember, and we mentioned in another podcast just recently that you used to go to the bottle shop and they'd only have about 6 or 7 different varieties of beer. Now the whole back wall is just a different, one after another, after another, after another. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's therapeutic, I find. The artwork on some of them are incredible. And, I could be in there for an hour sometimes. And I spoke to a bloke at the bottle shop the other day, and he goes, "Oh, are you all right, mate?" I said, yeah, I'm all good. And I said, sometimes I get mesmerised by all these cans. And he goes, "Oh, the amount of phone calls blokes get where they're here from their wife going, 'You left an hour ago. Where are you?'"
I'm either at the Bottle O or Bunnings.
Yeah, that's right. Dan Murphy's is like going to Toys R Us for the kids.
Yeah, the sooner they move a Dan Murphy's into a Bunnings, the better for everyone.
Oh, that's like a fun park, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What is your favourite movie?
The Big Lebowski.
Yep.
I love The Big Lebowski. Jeff Bridges in that film. There's something about it. The soundtrack's incredible as well. Some great Bob Dylan songs on that album. And it's just so the Coen Brothers films there's something about the characters, in those films that just get me. And I could watch that film. I think I've watched it 1,000 times, and it never gets old. And you watch an old film back sometimes now, and you go, "Oh, that's not as good as I remembered it to be." But that just is a classic. I love it.
There's not too many. Well, I don't feel there's not too many comedy films that hold the time and that's probably one of them. There's a few that, and as you said, you watch them back and you go, oh, geez, that's not as funny as I remember it was as well.
No, totally, yeah. Well, in that regards too, we just went on holidays and we drove past the big banana, and I remember it used to be big. It's not that big anymore.
Nah.
So, maybe it's just we're getting older.
You've got bigger.
Yeah, that's right.
Who do you admire the most?
Wow, that's a tricky question, isn't it? That one. Definitely, I think my wife. That sounds pretty crap on a three blokes talking about crap on a podcast. But once you see your wife give birth, I think women just become like. Not that I ever was, blokes or anything like that, but you genuinely have a new healthy respect for anything that anyone ever has to go through. My wife gave birth twice without any drugs, and you just go, well, whatever I ever have to endure for the rest of my life is nothing compared to what you had to go through for us. So, and, I admire the fact that she had 9 months off to drink or whatever it was. I couldn't do that.
and also she's a good homeschooler.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Yeah. So, definitely her. Also I have a good solid. A lot of my mates I admire a lot. I had a bit of depression about a year ago or so, and it sort of stemmed back family related somewhat, and therefore I felt like I didn't have a lot of family support around. And then what I've slowly worked out is that a lot of my really close mates became my family, and I think that can be that way for a lot of people. Is that you're looking at your immediate family, and you might not be getting the support that you're after, but I was getting support off people who I consider now my family, who are necessarily immediately related to. So, I certainly admire people like that a lot.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It is amazing, as you said, once you see your partner give birth and then things like that. It's a man flu isn't really up to scratch compared to a pregnancy and things like that.
No.
And
I do think that one day some man will die from the man flu, though, because it's not really taken seriously enough. That's my only concern with the man flu is like as soon as a bloke gets sick, like we've all been desperately ill before.
Yeah.
And what happens? Oh, he's got the man flu, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just don't get
lose
it.
One.
They just don't understand it, Steve.
No.
And finally, if heaven does exist, what would God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I'm not super religious, so heaven for me.
Heaven for you is a keg in the backyard, isn't it?
You know what? I was actually just thinking that. I was like, heaven for me is going up the back and pouring a beer. Nah. Look.
What a way to go.
You stumped me on that one.
Well, it's not something you want to do soon anyway, mate.
No, that's exactly right. I hope I'm here for a little while longer. Although hopefully that people stop eating bats and we'll be all okay.
What's the future gigs, mate? Is there anything in the pipeline? Obviously, we're starting to get back to a little bit of normality soon, but you got anything that you want to try and promote?
Hopefully, yeah. I've done a couple of little stand-up gigs here and there, and I've done a TV gig. So I mentioned at the start that I do warm up. There's been a couple of inquiries already, and Channel 7 show, which I think is starting this coming week. You guys know The Chase with Andrew O'Keefe?
Yes.
The game show. They do a spin-off of it called Beat the Chasers. So it was the first time they've had a studio audience since COVID in any form in the country. When we were all in the studio, we filmed it about 3 months ago. It would have been about 2 months ago now. And obviously the audience were separated a fair bit. And they were all scanned and stuff before they came in. And all the details kept. One of the cameramen said, "What's it like to be the only working warm-up guy in the country?" And that was a real honour to be, the only person asked to do it, because there's obviously a bunch of guys that do it. So obviously the Melbourne folk can't get out anyway at the moment. But so I think it was a lot relying on that show to come back for then other shows to start coming back. As I said, I have to do Matty Johns, and I know Fox put a veto on all crowds to the end of the year. So hopefully the footy returning next year, the crowds will come back proper and the studio shows will come back, and I'll be able to do all those Matty John shows again next year and the studio shows. Those kind of warm-up things work great for me because I made a decision ages ago not to travel too much doing stand-up. Obviously, with a young family, most of comedy means that you have to go away. There's comedy festivals every second week these days. So I put that aside just to make some money and stay put. So, if I can pick those shows up in the new year, then that'll be fantastic. I've been delivering coffee, and you got to do anything to make money while this pandemic is on. So I'd love to get rid of the coffee. I'm greatly appreciative of what happened and how I'm making money from the coffee and the rest of it, but I'll let it go in a second. Just to go back.
Yeah, you wouldn't have second thoughts, I wouldn't imagine.
No.
But if you, to our listeners, if you do want to get in touch with Steve, you can probably get him best on Instagram. Is that correct, mate?
It's where I'm probably most active. Yeah, I'm on the Facebook and the Twitter and stuff. I got rid of a website a while ago. I couldn't be bothered with that. So yeah, I'm Instagram. I think I'm Steve_Philp, Philp. A lot of people get stuffed up with my surname for some reason. I was in the bank recently, and the guy goes, "How do you spell that?" And I said, Philp, and he goes, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Pretty sure, mate. Yeah, pretty sure I spelled it more than you have."
Are you sure?
Yeah, I know. What a lunatic. So, yeah, look me up. I film my kids a lot. My 3-year-old, I give him a bit of a hard time on Instagram. Right? #dickhead. He gets a fair bit of grief.
He is an absolute legend, and some of the best entertainment I've seen coming from him. He's good.
I was at a coffee shop a little while ago, and I had no idea. I'd never been there before, and I'd forgotten that I make these videos and that people watch them so much. And then this guy goes to me, the barista, and he just looks down at my kid, points, and goes, "Oh, look, it's the dickhead." Well, right, who's that, mate? I'm allowed to call him that. I'm not sure.
That's not his name.
No, I should get some shirts made up for him.
Hashtag.
A bit of merch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate you coming on today. You should be extremely proud of what you've achieved in the industry going forward. I hope it continues, but you are very entertaining on all fronts. By all means, to our listeners, look him up. If you got any gigs or anything, buy his tickets. Yeah, they're absolute legends. If you want a quick laugh as well, probably one of the most successful things I did was on the Troy Kinney show. You just Google, "Can you get in anywhere with a ladder?" We took a ladder down to Melbourne and just tried to get places that you normally wouldn't be able to go, like in a kitchen of a 5-star restaurant and wherever. And you literally got in everywhere. And I think collectively,
were you you had high vis on, I hope?
No, just a ladder. Like, all you need is a ladder. That's it. So everywhere we went, I nearly got on a ferry that went to, I don't even know where, but one of the producers had to race down and say, "Do not get on that ferry because there's one stop that's about an hour away." Right?
Oh, wow.
You get your back. So if you Google, "Can you get in anywhere with a ladder?" you'll see that. I think it's on various platforms. It's gone quite well. I actually have seen it, and it is quite funny. It's some of the places you do get into, just carrying a ladder. It might be good for in our industry where we're installing roller shutters. It might, in shop fitting, the guys might be able to just get in anywhere with a ladder and go for life. Yeah, give it a go.
We'll try that.
Mate, again, appreciate. Thank you for coming on. Enjoy.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Great
Thanks,
chat.
Steve.
Mate.
Good work. Cheers, mate.
That wraps up the 22nd episode in our chat with Steve Philp, stand-up comedian and TV legend. You can follow Steve on Instagram to see when he is next performing and buy tickets. It's Steve_Philp. That's PHILP. If you've missed any previous episodes of the KRGS Doors podcast, you can download them from our website, www.krgsdoors.com.au/podcast, or on your favourite podcast player, search KRGS Doors. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. This also boosts our ranking and my ego. The other thing I suggest, if you've enjoyed the podcast, visit your favourite podcast player and leave a review or a rating. On our next episode, we speak to the honorary member for Blaxland, Mr. Jason Clare. Mr. Clare was elected to the House of Representatives in 2007. His roles have included Minister for Home Affairs, Minister for Justice, and the Cabinet Secretary. We talk how he got into politics, how he was one of the last people to see John Newman before his murder, and what he thinks of the current state of politics. I've been your host, Drew Blackman, and you've been fantastic for tuning in today. As always, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. Thanks. Till next time. The KRGS Doors Show, proudly brought to you by KRGS Doors. For all your shopfront roller shutters, roller grills, folding closures and bifold doors, visit www.krgsdoors.com.au. Today, on the 22nd episode of the KRGS Doors podcast, I'm joined by KRGS Doors Managing Director Clayton Blackman and stand-up comedian and TV host Steve Philp. Steve has toured all around the world doing his live shows and worked on television such as The Footy Show and Ready Steady Cook. He was also the understudy for Captain Feathersword from The Wiggles and even starred in a YouTube skit that has had now over 3.8 million views. Please welcome to the podcast, Mr. Steve Philp.
If this doesn't turn you on, folks, you haven't got a switch.